Welcome. Tonight is, I don't even know the date,
December 3rd.
December 3rd, and we're having a budget committee workshop. Susan, if you want to start.
So at our last meeting, I had written out a little diagram on this notepad to share with you, kind of importance of the assistant superintendent's role and, how the SAU level supports the work of the building level, at the building level. So this is a little diagram. Kim, you weren't here. So, I just figured it's easier and gives you something to take with you. So that I'm happy to, if it's helpful, to walk you through it, again, now that you have a little picture in front of you in case you wanted to make some kind of notes. So we'll start with, level structure. And so you have a principal and you have two assistant principals. There's a lot of general administration that's shared by them, kind of areas of responsibility that are associated with the various positions. So, and this is, so the next page, if you turn, I provide you with a description of what falls under the domain of so that you understand in a more concrete way, what is types of programming you have under the domain of student services, and then academic services, what kinds of programs you have that's in the domain of academic services, and then organizational leadership. Those are the kind of pieces that are so important to ensuring the students get to school, are in school, are fed, scheduling is done so that the kids and the staff, are connected via their course selections, or the domain of organizational leadership. So if you take these domains in our structure here, the principal, so this is not new, okay?
Right.
This is a refinement of the structure that Meredith introduced 2 years ago. Okay? And I say refinement in that clarifying what's in each domain is the refinement. The structure was introduced 2 years ago. So I can give you a minute if you'd like to read, as opposed to me reading out loud, unless you prefer that.
Well, so when you look at the organizational leadership, are you then dividing, like, one vice president, freshman, another one has juniors and seniors, or how do you divide that up?
So under this structure, the school is a school, not two schools, which is a question I think that was asked at the last meeting. Are we really? I mean, there's technically what are we, and then there's in practice what are we.
Yeah.
And so there's a, as I said before, there's an identity crisis at the junior senior high school. Are we a middle school and a high school? Are we a junior senior high school? A junior high model is different than a middle school model. Are we one school? Are we two schools? What are we? And it is a little, can be a little bit confusing. But this model here is not necessarily what's been fully implemented. But it would mean that you have one building, and as opposed to two buildings. And so student services would be all the programming that is from 6 through 12. And academic services would be the coordination, articulation, and implementation of your educational program from 6 through 12. So so that's the way this is to be, is not to be separating out. Middle school is this and high school is this. It's a secondary experience. As I talked to you about at the last meeting, there are specific points where there's these ramp-up years where students need additional programming in order to meet the requirements that are on them as they move up in their learning experience. So that would be, when you exit, so kindergarten going into lower elementary school, third grade going into upper elementary school, ramping up into the middle school years, and then ninth grade as you're ramping up, because these are specific points where the expectations for students ramp up to another level, okay? And so you always need to be providing additional programming in those key, for them to be successful at that next juncture, they have to have additional support programs in place in order for them to make that leap. And one of the challenges and curriculum deficiencies that we have is we don't have clear programming. Poor kids as they make it through those transitional periods throughout the continuum of their education. And so student services is the side of the equation that would be providing that type of programming. So study skills is part of that. When you're increasing the level of rigor and expectation academically, then you don't want to wait till kids fail and then provide them services, right? We know as educators that when they're going through these periods, they're going to need additional support, so build that into the programming. It's much less expensive to do that and be proactive than it is to do kind of what we're doing now, which is, letting them jump into the big pool, the next big pool, and then waiting to see if they're going to be able to swim, and then give them the supports if they can't. It's really not what you want, because no kid is going to advance at the level that they would if you provide them with the scaffolding necessary to be successful. So with that in mind, I really believe that was Meredith's thinking when she put in this structure in place, is that if we could have a student services domain that focuses on student learning, which is essential to the success of kids. If you look at any research out there, it suggests strongly that the advancement of social and emotional learning skills, civic and social skills, has an impact on the academic learning of students. And without that, kids are not going to enjoy school to the same degree they otherwise would, and they're not going to feel successful as they try to navigate. So that's really important. So the student services piece is all of that. It's school counseling, it's your school social workers, it's your OT, your PT, your speech, all these services, your health services, your preschool programs, special education, 504, all of those kinds of programmings. When you have kiddos that come in and English is the second language, they need additional supports. That's academic supports. That's all falls in this domain. When kids are homeless or they're homebound, those are services. You have alternative education plans that are put together in order to support those kids so that they can transition back into the regular program. Your RT programs, so your tiered interventions, all of that, your PBIS, which we don't have, but we will have, all of that is student services.
PBIS, yes. What is it?
It's, acronym.
You can tell us.
Behavior, PBIS. It escapes me.
Oh, I missed it.
I will.
Don't worry about it.
It's not there right now.
But they're
Social emotional learning programming, which is so important today, as we try to attend to the needs of all of these complex mental health issues that we're dealing with. If you don't have kind of social and emotional learning focus areas built into your learning program, kids are just, they're not going to do as well as they otherwise would. And so having all of that in place so that as kids have a need, they transition in and back out seamlessly without having to get IEPs. And no, a kid needs a little bit of targeted help in a particular area, or they got the flu or something like that, and so they're a little behind. Let's give them some programming to help them get caught up and then back on their feet,
We have the benefit of a relatively small population where people are known, where we can have these things off for the passes when they arise.
Right, exactly. And we're doing that with a couple of kids now. I've been trying to introduce this idea of this comprehensive student service programming model. So that's what that's about. And then on the academic services side, that's really when you're talking about, curriculum, instruction, assessments, a lot of, and related professional development. And so that's a lot. There's a lot there. So it's making sure that you have, horizontal articulation of your curriculum, vertical articulation of your curriculum when you're going about changing the way you're going to approach and deliver instruction, that's the person that's kind of your leader that helps provide professional development, onboarding, induction programming to help people be successful when they come into your organization. So that's your academic service area. And that's typically what people think about, right? Oh, kids are going to school. They're going to teach. They're going to learn, right? Reading, writing, and arithmetic. But there's so much more to what we're doing today, and it's more than just that. Really, the big shift in education, I think, if I'm going to simplify it in some way, it's that historically the focus has been on content consumption, right? Get all the facts. You're tested on the facts.
Be able to spit it out.
You can spit, yeah, exactly. Memorize, recite, regurgitate, that type of a thing. And when I grew up, that's what it was. And if you could sit there in a nice little row and you could listen to this, and there was power in getting as many facts as you could, and the more facts you had, the smarter you were, right? There was this whole concept of education and intelligence that we were exposed to back then. But it's very different now. We know so much more than we did back then. But now, in the world today, kids can get content anywhere, right? They can just Google. I mean, we didn't have Wikipedia. We didn't, not that that's a great source, but you couldn't access research. You couldn't access Smithsonian Institute online to get information about science. You couldn't go to MIT's website and see all the kind of.
We didn't have a computer in our pocket.
We didn't. We didn't have any of that, right? So today, kids can get content outside of the walls. They don't have to come in our walls or into libraries in order to get information. Information's readily available. So what is the shift? And when we go through the visioning process, you will start to get a sense of this, that the shift really, in my mind, is going to skill development, right? So you're developing critical thinking skills, creativity, opportunities to express yourself, being able to take and synthesize information, and being able to take a lot of information in its current form and create it into something new, right? You become more than just somebody that consumes information. You critically assess and evaluate the information that you're receiving, and you're turning that into something and a product, right, that you're going to, so this idea of developing skills and the ability to think is really a different concept and a notion to design your learning experiences around, and then content should be in service to the development of skills. That's a very different shift in the way that we deliver curriculum, instruction, and assessment in the future. And so it's really important that you have these two domains of services that where they intersect is high quality learning experiences for kids. And to make these kind of shifts that we want to make, you need to have, expertise in both areas. And kids and staff are going to need, to be provided with the support necessary to make the shift in thinking, So you have the academic piece, and it's not all they do. I'm just saying there's a focus area. So at the junior senior high school, the academic domain is Jen, okay? And at the elementary level, it's Deb Raffo, okay? And then at the elementary school, the student services domain is Christina Cochran, and at the junior senior high school, it's Sarah Denham, okay? That doesn't mean they don't do student, dean of student type of activity. Right. Of course they do. And right now, the way it's set up, is that Sarah focuses on student, disciplinary issues and such at the middle school, and Jen at the high school. So there is a little bit of that. I think in an ideal world, student services would handle all of that, right? Including guidance services. Guidance services absolutely, in some ways, crosses over between the academic, right? Between both of them. They kind of rest in the middle. There's your support that binds the two together. Right. It's like your master schedule connects the two kinds of curriculums that you have together, to provide students with the learning experiences that they need to be successful, whether they're, support services or guidance services or, a little nursing support or academic support or whatnot. A lot of counseling at the secondary level is needed because they're adolescents, and you need to really have, some programming there to help them to be able to grapple with some of the challenges they're faced with in the world today, So organizational leadership is your principal, okay? It's always going to be your principal. So this is the person that manages your resources, right? They know how to pull the levers to, keep the school, flowing, smoothly, so that teachers get what they need when they need it, so that if there's challenges that are faced, there's somebody that's dealing with conflict resolution, that there's a person communicating outwardly with parents so that they're aware of what's going on, and there's about the programs and all of that we have here in our schools. They're the ones that hold and champion the vision for the school, and they are the ones that align the resources to make sure that vision is realized. Some concrete tasks that are owned by the principal is the master schedule, and we talked a lot about that before at our last meeting. So creating things that we really need to start introducing more of. So assembly kinds of programs where, you're addressing issues related to, the growth and development of women and growth and development of the boys, bullying and all of those kinds of things that are just so prevalent in our world today. So it's creating kind of this culture. They use the data in order to be able to develop programs. They look at the data and say, okay, we have, we need additional support in this area, or, we need to add staff because our elective programs need to be reimagined or grown in certain different directions to meet our graduation requirements. So all that is your principal. Your principal is the one that really ensures all of that and supports both the assistant principals in the work that they're doing. They enable the work to be done. And so they're the ones that when they have new staff that are coming on board, they're the ones that should be making sure that, they're getting the mentoring they need. They're getting the supports that they need. They're in observing those teachers frequently, where the assistant principals are doing some of that, but new staff should really be the principal. The principal should really be all over, who's the staff in my building, and do they meet the level of expectation that I would expect of my staff, and are they growing in their mastery of teaching practice? And if they're not at a certain point, you say, thank you for your efforts, but I'm going to go in a different direction. So that all of that, purchasing and budgeting and contract administration, due process oversight, absolutely is your principal. Making sure that policies and procedures are adhered to in the building these are all fundamental, primary roles and responsibilities that every principal in the country oversees. So, that gives you kind of a flavor for these domains and their intersection, and then there's shared responsibilities between every administrator. Evaluation and supervision of staff. All of us do that, right? Every administrator does that. Public relations, communication, culture, reinforcing, the kind of culture, the practice, modeling that you would want. Policy and regulatory oversight, community and family engagement, school safety, all of those things, right? All of those things we all share. So hopefully that gives you, something more tangible and concrete that you can take with you so that you understand, kind of the building level structure. So then, as I was explaining to you on whatever day we met, Saturday, that there's support at the SAU, leadership, right, that helps to coordinate and provide support to these domains. And without these leadership positions in place, then at the building level, they wind up doing a lot of things that prevent them from staying laser focused on what's going on in the building and in the classrooms. So the Director of Student Services, Erica here, is the one that is the leader in the student service domain, okay? So she's like the expert in that area. She's the one that provides programming and understands not just what's going on at the elementary level, but how that translates into what we need to be doing at the secondary level. So we have what we call vertical coordination of our learning, opportunity, and not just learning, especially with that. It's growing concepts and ideas, so that you don't introduce certain ideas and use a certain vocabulary at the elementary school and then doesn't apply to anything that you're doing at the high school, right? Or the middle school. So there's this kind of common language that you develop and approaches and strategies that you use that then kids become familiar with, so that you can help them, instead of always going, an inch deep, because they learn a lot of little things about a lot of little things, you can actually grow deeper in their development.
It helps the families too.
And it helps the families too on how do you reinforce and support the kinds of things that are going on in the schools, and how do we support what families are doing at home? How do we support what's going on in the rec departments, and how do we start to develop this common language? And that is largely, that's one of our curricular gaps, okay, where we don't have that. And then on the other side, okay, so student services, on the other side, we don't have an assistant superintendent. So there is nobody, to help oversee that work. And so what I've given you is a job description that outlines those basic, high-level areas that the assistant superintendent would be responsible for in this model. So not surprising, curriculum, instruction, and assessment, because they're kind of overseeing that academic domain, right? And all of the assessment work that goes along with that. So they're and then on the other side is all your student performance data and understanding. And so they're kind of a master with that. And that's not to say that you don't have a lot of data that is overseen by student services, because you're looking at different metrics there. But when you're talking about reporting to the state and all of that, primarily that's your assistant superintendent or your BA. Those two are the ones that are really have a lot of outward-facing responsibilities for reporting. One of the things I did yesterday in preparation for a meeting with the budget committee coming up is, as I've ordered the flyer that I had shared with you at our retreat that showed over for every decade, all that has been added to the responsibility of your school system.
That's actually a really good visual.
Yeah, so I've ordered one for each one of them. Okay. So when we talk about administration, this idea of what the heck do the administrators do? Well, let's look at what the rules are. And why, and why does it maybe seem like, and they really haven't expanded over the years, honestly. You've always had a superintendent, assistant superintendent, BA. The structure hasn't really changed much over the years. Some of these roles and responsibilities, like this structure, that's introduced here with this, these domains of leadership, might be a little different here, but all this work has to be done by somebody. Right. It's not optional. We're mandated to do these things, and so every time that there's some kind of a social challenge, then the lever, right, the governmental lever for addressing the social issue is to require schools to add programming. That's how we got PE. That's how we got kindergarten. Food service, right? Yep. The kids weren't being fed, so now we're going to feed them.
And hygiene.
Exactly, and bullying. We have the internet. We have, all of this kind of programming that needs to be added. And then when, social services grows, right, and you have mandated reporting, and then schools become mandated reporters. So child abuse, there's all of these obligations and responsibilities that we have. And somebody has to perform those roles and make sure that work gets done. Because oftentimes our funding is tied to accomplishing these various responsibilities. So if we don't do it, then you can't access certain resources, and so there's that connection there. So again, so the assistant superintendent would focus on curriculum instruction and assessment, and not in the class, they're not telling the teachers what they're going to do, right? The idea of this articulation, and somebody that is looking at reviewing what we're doing to make sure that, hey, if we're not getting if we're looking at data and we see a gap in a certain area, so let's say comprehension and reading. Kids aren't doing very well according to what we're looking at the data. So then you're going to look at, okay, what is the curriculum? Like what can we add to improve this gap that we're seeing here? You know, so it's somebody that's looking at that and then sitting with teachers and saying, okay, what are you doing? Or maybe you're looking at 4 fourth grade classrooms, and one of them you're not seeing that gap, but the other 3 you are. So you could think, okay, so let's find out what this teacher's doing that's different than what the other teachers are doing. Or, you know, or if 3 of them are scoring well and one classroom teacher is not, what's going on there? You know, and principals do this too. I'm not saying it's only your assistant superintendent, but they're the ones that help work with the building level staff to look at what are the options, you know, what kinds of things.
We're taking 3 positions. We're taking data manager, curriculum coordinator, assistant superintendent, putting it under one umbrella and calling it assistant superintendent.
Yes.
So I think that's really important that people know that when we go to the budget. It's actually 3 positions. Yes, and that position's gone now.
Yeah.
But and we've often said maybe that could be put under the assistant superintendent. We had a curriculum coordinator for years.
Right.
So the past 14 years we've had that, and then 2 years ago we finally named it for what it was, it being that position, because the curriculum coordinator could never do curriculum because they were always doing superintendent stuff. So I like this idea of combining those, putting it on an umbrella, but then also saying it's going to flow down. You're going to see this happening. We're all going to help this so that we don't run into that where things are falling in the cracks.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and so if you look back over the goals that were adopted, I gave you this, you know, and I said, look at how we're vertically aligning what your goals are, what my goals are, and the building level goals. And we have organizational goals, we have academic goals, and we have student service goals. So Erica is the person at the central office that's really working with both schools on those goals, along with the assistant principals, so that we make sure that we have, you know, programming that is, you know, integrated. And but there is nobody to do the academics, so I'm doing that. And we don't have a business manager, so I'm doing that. We don't have an HR person, so I'm doing that. And so therefore I'm not doing, notice how I haven't done anything on my entry plan? Because I can't do my job.
Right.
I can't do my job because I have to do all of these other jobs. And it has an impact, you know, on everybody, right? I cannot continue to work 80 or 90 hours a week. In the last 3 weeks, I went home one night. I was here last night until 9 o'clock again. You know, and I'm not complaining. I'm just saying, I can't do this. I've done this since the day I walked in here. And I can't do this forever.
Which is why we said, as a board, we're like, get your assistant superintendent. And you didn't find that BA that met that criteria. You're like, I don't have it. And we're like, then do what you need to do. So we just need the community to understand where these positions are coming from, that they're combined positions. And this is going to help us work as a school.
And it's a step in the visioning process.
Yeah.
It is.
And the goal that we had in terms of having every child, regardless, successful in a variety of different areas.
Right.
And things pertaining to each area that you've outlined. Student services realm, the organizational leadership realm, and the academic realm. That's sort of where that it all comes into play. And to have success in those areas, we need to have a leader at the central office who's doing those things.
And the leader needs to have backup, because that's the other thing over the years we learned, because guess what? Superintendents take vacations. They actually get sick sometimes, and you need to have that second in command. And we haven't had that in quite a while.
And I think in the long run, so we're going to go through a visioning process next year. And having these positions in place will be enormously beneficial. We're going to need them anyways in order to make the shift. Like I said, we're making a fundamental shift in how we approach our work. And if you're going to make this shift, you've got to have the staff to support the shift. Otherwise, you're going to, as we read in the data, the survey data, you're going to have 15 starts. Nobody knows how they're connected to one another, because we're going to start this, and we're going to start this, and there's a rhyme and reason to all of it. But if you don't have the staff that's there, that stays there, in order to be able to start something, grow it, and the other challenge we have is a 20% turnover ratio at our high school. And when this is just in your professional staff. Turnover ratio like that, you're going to have a difficult time getting anywhere. Yeah. You have a core group of teachers that stay, and then you've had this revolving door. And so anything that you have introduced, if you lose 20% of your staff, the next year, 20% of your staff is 1 year behind in your school improvement, And so then you've got to start here. Then you've got people that are 3-year, people that are at 2-year, and then you got a new crop, 20% of your staff. I mean, it's just not sustainable. So the other huge part of this is to develop, mentoring and induction programming here. It's huge. Recruitment and creating a pipeline of talent that then gets supported here is absolutely essential to our future. It's essential to our work today. When I walked in with 36 vacancies, I came from a school twice this size, and we were advertising for 6 positions. 6 positions. 36 positions in a teeny little school district. It's not good for kids, for one. It's not good for the staff. No. If you're constantly trying to bring your neighbor up to speed, your focus isn't on what's going on in just your classroom. And these teachers who have such an ethic of care for this community are being, drained. We read about that in the survey information. They're exhausted. And
if I've been here for 20 years and I've seen several people go through in several different things, it's going to be hard for me to feel like it's time to now buy in. So I think we need to work on a cultural climate shift, as we've talked about so many times before, because people need to understand that this is a means to an end for greater success for everyone involved in the process. Right. And sincerely have that on all levels so that people really understand that and buy in.
Exactly. So this recruitment, induction, and mentoring is absolutely critical. And the person that oversees this typically is your assistant superintendent. And then grant management is the other piece. And I'll tell you why that's so important, that it be that person. Because if you know what the programming is, if you know what our needs are, what the vision is, then you can see what's out there and make connections. One of the things I see that public schools will do is they'll grab any money they can get. But what that does, it siphons away organizational energy from accomplishing your goals. In other words, it's a butterfly. Let's grab it, because wouldn't it be nice to have $80,000? $80,000 that's something cool and interesting and fabulous for a couple of years, but is it really helping you to focus on getting where you want to be? Right. Or is it just another cool thing? And I'm not saying that you aren't mindful of that, but if it doesn't fit into the work that you're doing right now, it's not worth grabbing $50,000 for something that is going to take a lot of time and energy away from what you're doing.
And grant writing is hard. Like, it's a process to write things correctly to get the money in the end. And so why waste time on money that's not even going after what you want to go after?
Right. And so if you have somebody that's managing it, that knows how to leverage those kinds of resources in support of your goals, you can, save taxpayers' dollars, and I'm all about that, So that's why that part of the, which might seem like, well, that's a business part. And there is a business part. You know that there's a role the accountant plays in the grants management piece.
Right.
It's not this role at all.
Right.
It's the setting up the,
It's when you get the money.
Exactly.
And make sure you're meeting all the
Requirements.
criteria.
Exactly. Meeting the criteria, the billing's going out, the
Right.
backup's done. When you're ready for the audits, they've got all of that back. Yeah. So that's kind of the backside. This is the front side of grant writing. And then the last piece is just your other. So they They assist me with public relations. They keep abreast of current educational trends through research. Knowledge of an ability to apply technology in educational settings, attend board meetings, do things in the community. I can't be everywhere. And I would expect my staff at the SAU to start to be visible within the community once we can. But right now, Erica and I just can't because we're doing all of this. And we're doing all of this in a system that doesn't have good practices in place. The structures and the systems are not in place right now to be able to function at the level we want to be able to function at.
Going along with what Elizabeth was saying in terms of, the gap that we feel, I think one of the points in this whole thing is that, an attempt was made 2 years ago to bring a different perspective into the individual schools. It's been determined that that was a necessary step, but we need to just take it to the next step and bring the assistant superintendent back. With 2 years of knowledge and your expertise coming in outside and evaluating things, it's been determined that this is the course of action we need to take.
Test scores.
Yes. The
So
data.
we have the data to back it up.
Well, I think too, we had talked about, making sure we have a lot of, young administrators. So,
Right.
When your pipeline of administrators are new administrators, you need at some point to have a few people that have some experience in administration, right? So, I have experience. Erica is great. This is her 3rd year as an administrator, and so, she's blossoming. There's no question about that. But there's a certain amount of support. They don't just know because they haven't had these experiences. They've got to have the opportunity to learn, but you can't have everybody being that. You need to have some folks with some experience. So at the elementary school level, Sean's been a principal for a while, and certainly Debbie has been here for 30 years. So you've got some of that. So then they have a new assistant principal who doesn't have a lot of experience, right? And then, but at the high school, you had, a principal. You have a principal with very little experience, and you have an assistant principal with 1 year of experience. And now we have an assistant principal that has years of, and you can see a huge difference in what's happening there.
And I think that group can become its own learning and mentoring community. Even though I may be in the organizational leadership phase of side of the house, maybe someone who's in the academic side can show me what it means to be a leader in education.
And that's what's happening now.
Good.
It has to, because the person in that role has more experience than anybody else in the building. So, so we do have that. But it doesn't take away from the fact that you need to have, leadership at the SAU level, because if you don't, then all of that administrivia, all the other requirements, the articulation between the two schools doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen.
And it also impacts the relationship with the board, because there's that lack of communication not coming out. You can see when you don't have enough people and you don't have the ability to maintain all relationships, things fall apart.
Yeah.
And that's what we learned in the last 2 years.
Yeah, and you can see it even with me, I feel it, my strengths, I can do all of this because I've been doing it for years. This isn't where my strengths lie.
Right.
Building coalitions, being in the community, developing programs, making connections, inspiring other people to do their best work, those are the things that I'm really good at. But I can't do those things because, I'm trying to tick and tie numbers in your budget, and I'm trying to handle your personnel issues every day, and I'm trying to run your academic, and teach not just these folks how to use an inquiry process. There's a lot of opportunity for growth here, and I'm not saying I'm not doing any of it. I just can't get to doing that at any one thing. Today was, okay, I've got to do budget. All day yesterday was personnel. Today it's doing budget and trying to move forward with these goals.
Yeah.
Giving them readings, the team leaders saying, having them do reflections, and they'll give them to me, and I'll give them little, but if I don't do that, then we're not going to get to where we want to be, because if I can't grow a cohort of people that have the capacity to be able to engage in school improvement in this way, we're never going to get where we're going to be.
Right.
So, to have, the assistant superintendent role it's just necessary.
But the way you're describing it is what our community needs to know. Why do we need this? Well, here, we're gonna go over it. Here's why we need this. Here's the position. We're actually combining 3 different positions, so it looks like, oh, putting another administrator. Actually, no. We're combining 3 positions, making it 1, spreading the wealth. We are going to keep the 2 assistant principals at the school. Why are we doing that? Well, here's why. Here's this role, here's this role. I think it's so important that we communicate what the needs are, what their positions are, and what their role is.
So I'll put this as an appendix in the budget packet that will be sent out. I know I gotta get that tomorrow, but I had a death, a close member of our family, so I'm gonna not be here in the morning. I have to go to the funeral, because I can't be in the morning. So I'm gonna do my level best to get this out to the budget committee, but because of that, I might be Thursday before I can get, the packet to them, but, sometimes you just have to do what
We have to do.
yeah. So that's the update on that, and hopefully you'll find that to be a helpful visual. Then
Yes,
Very helpful.
the other thing that and this isn't done, it's not complete, and I'll continue to work on it for the PowerPoint, but I had a couple of hours before our last meeting to go through and start to pull out, tease out, okay, what are some of the highlights of this budget in terms of costs, and how that supports our program that we'd like to introduce next year. So I typed it up, and it's not all the increase, it's just a portion of it, but I will continue, like I said, we have collective bargaining agreements, and so that's not reflected. The impact of that is usually pretty significant. Marie
Right.
said just for the teachers' piece, she said it was over $500,000, and so, I'll try to pull some more of those numbers together between now and the meeting with the budget subcommittee, and I will provide you with the information as well as I'm able to go through and continue to, pull things out. In other words, we had, what I want to look at is, like Sean added money for the curriculum, for the reading program for next year. But we might have reduced in other areas, and I haven't had a chance to kind of look more globally and say, for instructional supplies and materials at the building level, overall, we've gone up or we've gone down, because that'll be a little bit. But the fact of the matter is that most of the money that you spend in schools is for staff and benefits.
Yep.
I mean, those are your
Yeah.
two big
It's a
ticket items. Usually those two represent 75 to 80%. I don't know what your number is here, but
Yeah.
usually 75 to 80%.
Yeah.
And then you add your principal and interest payments on your bond. That's then usually your next biggest one. So you've got that, and that's kind of baked into these numbers too. And then you add your facilities, infrastructure stuff. So what does it cost to turn on your lights? What does it cost to keep, the technology working in your building? What does it cost to heat? What is it, so your operational piece is another part. And by the time you get down and all is said and done, you really have just a small sliver of money that you really have any kind of,
And that's
control
basically
over.
what the budget committee, they want to know, what's that small sliver?
Yeah.
What is it, what does it mean, what does it represent? And you're showing part of that here.
Yeah.
And again, 2 full-time employees, if, we'd like to add them on, because we would like to do some,
Targeted improvements to
Yes.
our educational programs at the high school. Yeah.
there's another word, but that's okay. But we can prove that, like, that's, again, in our data, right?
Yeah. So these were the things that when I was thinking about, the proposal that I brought forward to you, that I talked about the first night we met, these were the items that I had mentioned.
Yeah.
The rest of the costs aren't any changes in what we're
Right.
doing. It's what we would consider to be kind of, I guess you guys call it here status quo. In other words, if we're just going to move forward with the programs that we have now, then it costs a certain amount of money.
Right.
And so these are things that are different from what my best understanding of what's different between what you're currently spending money on and what you would be spending money on. A few exceptions, of course, the transportation, that contract increase, you're providing contract now. There's no improvements, and maybe, when I rethink this, I'll put them in different categories, what are like improvements versus what is just costs that are escalating because of the cost of doing business. And, I could probably separate it that way for the budget subcommittee, or not it's a full committee, right? It's a budget committee. It's not a subcommittee. That concept, I can't. The budget, having a finance committee or a budget committee is something I'm familiar with. It's usually from my prior life, it's a subcommittee of the town. But here I learned it is actually a committee that the town and the school kind of have a relationship with. It's not a town board, and it's not a school board. I'll get budget committee down eventually. So that's,
So this, everything here looks familiar from what we've talked about before. There's nothing new here
Nope. That's
right.
That's a summary of what I gave you orally the other day.
Right.
And I guess it would just be from this 699,000, how do we get from there to the 1.5? Is it the teacher's contract that brings it up $500,000 more?
Yeah.
Whatever that difference is to get us to the 1.5.
And hopefully I'll have access to Marie later in the week, and she can help me curate those details. I just know what I'm asking for. I'm telling you what
Right.
the kinds of things that are, we'll say, enhancements, improvements, will help us move forward or stabilize the organization. And those areas are, important. So the curriculum instruction, I organized it like that. Is the athletics, there would be more, again, whatever we're adding for supplies and materials, I can add it to that bucket there. Up or down, I always think it's good to say we're not asking for more in every area, There's some areas where we save money, and we're proud of that, we're not just trying to spend for the sake of spending, we're trying to be as frugal as we can in the areas that we're able to. So that's what I have for you.
All right. Anybody have any questions or any more comments?
Susan, I was thinking about, and Elizabeth, you can tell me what you think about this. Since we would not have voted on this until Thursday, should Susan wait to submit it, or what do you think?
Yeah. I'll let Mickey know
Okay.
what's going on.
Because Susan, we need to approve the budget that you are going to present. Because
Okay.
it goes from being your budget to being our budget fundamentally, even though it's the same budget. But we accept it, and then it's presented to the budget committee. So I would think that with that, if we wait until the meeting on Thursday, that gives you a little bit more time too to meet with Marie and get it finalized.
She's not here till Thursday.
Before we get it back.
Okay.
So if we could, vote on that on Thursday.
Yeah, let Mickey know, and then we can, as soon as
That would be wonderful.
as
because
soon as we say that,
I was feeling-
Marie can send it
Yeah.
out.
I'm assuming we're going to vote on Thursday that night or
We'll
first
do
thing
it first
Friday.
thing. Yeah,
can
we'll
go
do it
out.
first thing Thursday, and then we can just roll it out. We can go over. You can show it any last minute stuff you want to change to it, and then if we say yay, send it out.
Okay.
We'll send it right to budget.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, so looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. I'll second it.
Marty? Second motion, Jen? Okay, we're adjourned.